We were born in an orphanage. We inherited a barn. And in the basement there was a treasure. Caleb felt his hands tremble as he held the papers the lawyer had just handed him. Beside him, his younger brother, Leo, only 10 years old, looked confused at the adults talking about inheritance and rural property, words that seemed from another world to two children who knew only the cold hallways of the orphanage. It was then that the man in the dark suit turned to them and said the words that would change their lives forever. You have inherited a farm with a barn from your great-great-uncle Silas, whom you didn't even know existed. But there's a condition, the lawyer continued, avoiding the boy's gaze. You need to live there for at least a year, that's what the will says. Caleb, at 12 years old, had already learned to distrust anything that seemed too good to be true. 11 years at St. Jude's Children's Home had taught him that adults always had ulterior motives, and that pretty promises almost always hid something bad. And if we don't want to? He asked, squeezing Leo's small hand. The lawyer cleared his throat, nervously shuffling the papers. Well, in that case, the property goes to the second heir mentioned in the will. A distant cousin of yours. Leo tugged on his brother's sleeve. Caleb, can we have real chickens? The younger boy's innocent question made Caleb's heart tighten. Leo always dreamed of animals, but at the orphanage not even a little bird was allowed. Maybe, just maybe, this was the chance they had been waiting for. Okay, said Caleb, still cautious. We accept. The lawyer seemed relieved, but Caleb noticed something strange in his look. It was as if he knew something he wasn't telling. 3 days later, they were in the bed of an old pickup truck, carrying only 2 backpacks with their few clothes and some books Caleb had managed to save over the years. The director of the orphanage, Mrs. Gable, had been surprised by the speed of it all, but signed the transfer papers without asking many questions. Caleb was suspicious of that too. Mrs. Gable never let anything pass without questioning. The driver was a quiet man who introduced himself only as Rusty. During the 2-hour journey along the dirt roads of rural Kentucky, he spoke little, only pointing occasionally to some crop or grazing cattle. That's Mr. Arthur Sterling's farm, he said as they passed a large, well-kept gate. Rich man, that one. Has land to spare. Caleb noticed the strange tone in Rusty's voice, but didn't ask anything. He was too busy trying to calm Leo, who had vomited twice during the trip because of the bumps in the road. When they finally arrived at the farm, Caleb felt his stomach sink. The property looked nothing like what he had imagined. The wooden gate was crooked, hanging on rusty hinges. The small house with exposed bricks had several broken roof tiles, and the paint on the walls was peeling. But it was the barn that caught his attention, a tall, imposing structure made of dark wood that seemed much older than the rest of the property. Is this really it? Asked Leo, disappointed. This is it, replied Rusty, unloading the backpacks. The key is under the pot there on the porch. If you need anything, Mrs. Higgins lives in the house next door. She can help you. And with those words, he got into the pickup truck and left, leaving a cloud of red dust in the air. The boys stood still for a few minutes looking around. The silence was different from anything they knew. At the orphanage, there was always noise, children crying, shouting, running through the hallways. Here, all they could hear was the wind rustling the trees, and some sounds Caleb couldn't identify. Look, Caleb! Leo pointed excitedly to a corner of the yard where some chickens were pecking near what looked like a makeshift chicken coop. It was the first time in months that Caleb had seen his brother smile for real. Maybe this place wasn't so bad after all. They got the key from under the pot of dried plants and entered the house. The smell of mold was strong, but the basic furniture was all there. A wooden table, 2 chairs, an old but still firm sofa, and in the bedrooms 2 single beds with mattresses that seemed to be in good condition. In the kitchen they found some provisions, rice, beans, oil, sugar, and even a loaf of bread that seemed to have been left recently. Someone knew we were arriving today, murmured Caleb, suspicious. But Leo had already forgotten any worry and was running through the house, exploring every corner with the curiosity of someone who had never had a home of their own. Caleb, come see, there's a huge backyard out back. Indeed, behind the house, there was a large fenced space with an abandoned vegetable garden where some wild greens were still growing. And at the very back, imposing against the sky that was beginning to darken, was the barn. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. While Leo ran after the chickens, laughing for the first time in a long while, Caleb walked slowly toward the barn. The structure was indeed impressive. The timbers were thick and dark, and the main door was closed with an old but sturdy padlock. On the right side of the structure, there was a smaller door also locked, but Caleb noticed that the wood around the lock was rotten. "Leo, come here." The younger brother came running, his cheeks still red from laughing so much. "What is it?" "We need to get inside this barn. What if there's something important in there?" "But it's locked, Caleb." "I know, but look here." He pointed to the rotten wood around the lock. "If we push together, I think we can get it open." It took a few minutes of effort, but finally the door gave way with a loud creak. The inside of the barn was dark, but the late afternoon light coming through the door revealed a space much larger than it seemed from the outside. There were old farming tools hanging on the walls, empty sacks stacked in a corner, and, at the very back, a wooden ladder leading to a loft. "What a big place," whispered Leo. Caleb grabbed an old flashlight that was hanging near the door and tested if it worked. To his surprise, it still had batteries. "Let's go up there." The ladder creaked with each step, but it held the weight of both boys. The loft was smaller than the lower part, but it had something that immediately caught Caleb's attention. On the wooden floor there was a plank that looked different from the others, as if it had been removed and replaced several times. "Leo, help me here." Together they managed to lift the loose plank. Underneath was a space dug into the earth, like a kind of small cellar. The flashlight revealed something that made Caleb's heart race. An old wooden box, the size of a small suitcase. "Could it be real treasure?" asked Leo, his eyes shining. Caleb carefully climbed down into the hole and picked up the box. It was heavy, but not as heavy as it would be if it had gold or money. Carefully they climbed back up to the loft and opened the lid. Inside there was no gold or money. Instead they found letters yellowed with time, some old photographs, and documents that looked important. Caleb picked up one of the photos and held it up to the light. The image showed a young woman holding a baby in her arms, next to a tall, thin man. Behind them, Caleb recognized the same barn they were in now. "Who could they be?" asked Leo. Caleb turned the photo over. On the back, in faded cursive handwriting, it was written, "Sarah, baby Caleb and Silas, 1987. Caleb's heart stopped. Caleb was his name. And 1987, he had been born in 1987. With trembling hands, he picked up one of the letters. The paper was delicate and yellowed, but still readable. "My dear brother Silas, I don't know if Caleb and Leo will ever be able to read this letter, but I need to record the truth. I didn't abandon my children by choice. Sterling's family forced me. They said if I didn't leave and abandon the children, they would make up stories about me, say I was a bad mother, that I didn't know how to take care of the boys. They threatened to take custody away from me anyway, and even put me in jail for things I never did. You were the only one who tried to defend me. But they silenced you too. I know they threatened you somehow. I promised that one day I would come back for my children, but each year that passes it gets harder. They must hate me now. If you ever manage to find them, please tell them I never stopped loving them, and tell them the real treasure of this property isn't gold or money. It's in the secret garden our grandfather planted behind the barn. The seeds he kept are worth more than any riches. With all my love, Sarah." The letter was dated December 1989. Caleb did the math quickly. Leo was only 1 year old when their mother wrote that. They were taken to the children's home when Caleb was 2. He only had vague memories of a woman with brown hair who sang softly, but he always thought it was just a dream. Leo, who still couldn't read very well, looked at his brother, confused. "What does it say, Caleb?" For a moment, Caleb didn't know what to say. How to explain to a 10-year-old that the mother they thought had abandoned them was actually forced to leave? How to tell him that someone had lied about her to separate them? It's about our mother, Leo. Our mother." The boy's eyes widened. We have a mother? Yes, and she didn't leave because she wanted to. Caleb read the whole letter to his brother, simplifying the hardest parts. When he finished, Leo was crying, but not from sadness. It was a mix of relief and hope that Caleb was also feeling. "So she can come back?" asked Leo. "I don't know, Leo. It's been a long time. But now we know the truth." They gathered all the letters and photos and went back to the house. It was almost night and Caleb needed to prepare something for them to eat, but his mind was elsewhere. Who was this Sterling the letter mentioned? And what family had threatened their mother? While heating a can of beans he found in the pantry, Caleb heard footsteps on the porch. A light knock on the door made him stop. "It must be Mrs. Higgins," he said to Leo, "the neighbor that Rusty mentioned." But when he opened the door, who was there was a tall, middle-aged man, wearing expensive clothes that contrasted with the rural setting. "Good evening, boys. I am Arthur Sterling. You must be the heirs of my Uncle Silas." Caleb felt a chill in his stomach. Sterling, the same name mentioned in their mother's letter. It couldn't be a coincidence. "May I come in? I need to talk to you about an interesting proposal." Reluctantly, Caleb let the man in. Arthur looked around the simple house with an expression Caleb couldn't decipher. "Look, boys, I know you are very young to understand certain things, but this property is no place for children. Do you see how everything is abandoned? There's not even proper electricity. The water comes from a well. You'll be isolated here." "We're fine," said Caleb suspiciously. But I have a better proposal. How about I buy this property from you? I can pay good money. Enough for you to go back to the city and have a better life." Caleb looked at Leo, who was holding tightly to his shirt. The boy seemed frightened by this strange man talking about selling the only home they had ever had. "No, thank you. We want to stay here." Arthur's face hardened for a second, but soon returned to a forced smile. "Think it over carefully, boys. I'll come back tomorrow to talk again. I'm sure you'll change your minds." And without waiting for a reply, he left the house, leaving a strong scent of expensive cologne in the air. "Caleb, I didn't like him," whispered Leo. "Me neither, Leo. Me neither." That night, Caleb could hardly sleep. He kept thinking about his mother's letter, the strange man who showed up wanting to buy the property, and the secret garden mentioned in the letter. What seeds were those that were worth more than gold? The next morning, they were awakened by voices outside. Caleb looked out the window and saw Arthur talking to an elderly woman with grey hair. That must be Mrs. Higgins, he thought. They left the house to greet the neighbor, but the conversation they overheard put them on alert. "They're too young to be alone here, Mrs. Higgins. It's dangerous. But they seem clever, Mr. Arthur. And Silas made it very clear in the will. The will might have problems. These children might not even be real relatives of Silas. Who can guarantee?" The elderly woman seemed bothered by the comment. "Good morning," Caleb said loudly, interrupting the conversation. Mrs. Higgins turned with a genuine smile. "Ah, the boys. Good morning, dears. I'm Eleanor. I live in the house next door. I came to see if you need anything." "Thank you very much, Mrs. Higgins. We're fine." Arthur approached them. "Have you thought about my proposal, boys?" "We don't want to sell," said Caleb firmly. But perhaps you'll change your minds when you learn that I can challenge this will in court. Silas was ill in his last days. Perhaps he wasn't in a condition to decide about the inheritance." Mrs. Higgins interrupted him. "Mr. Arthur, you're talking about children. Leave them be." "I'm only looking out for their well-being, Mrs. Higgins. Orphaned children need protection." The word orphaned came out of his mouth with a tone that made Caleb shiver. It was the same tone some orphanage staff used when they wanted to make the boys feel small and helpless. "Come on, Leo," said Caleb, taking his brother's hand. "Let's go check on the chickens." As they walked away, they heard Arthur continuing his conversation with Mrs. Higgins, but speaking more quietly. Caleb was sure they were talking about them. "Caleb, is he going to take our house away?" asked Leo, worried. "I don't know, Leo, but we won't let it happen easily." They spent the morning exploring the property better. Behind the barn, as mentioned in their mother's letter, there was an area surrounded by tall trees, almost hidden. What remained of the garden was hard to recognize, Tall weeds had taken over everything, but Caleb managed to identify some old flower beds and even a small abandoned greenhouse. "This must be where our great-great-uncle planted the special seeds," he said to Leo. "What kind of seeds?" "I don't know yet, but Mom's letter said they were worth more than gold." In the afternoon, Mrs. Higgins appeared again, this time alone. She brought a pot of food and a maternal smile that warmed the boys' hearts. "I brought some stew for you. I imagine you're not used to cooking." "Thank you very much," said Caleb. "You're very kind." As she warmed the food on the wood stove, Mrs. Higgins asked questions about how they were settling in, if they needed anything, if they had plans for the future. Caleb answered carefully, without giving too many details. The years at the children's home had taught him to be cautious with adults, even the ones who seemed kind. "Mrs. Higgins, did you know our great-great-uncle Silas?" he asked. "Yes, I knew him, dear. He was a good man, but very reserved. In recent years he became even more withdrawn. He hardly spoke to anyone." "And our mother? Did you ever know a young woman named Sarah?" Mrs. Higgins's expression changed subtly. It was quick, but Caleb noticed. "Sarah," she repeated slowly. "It's been a long time since I've heard that name." "So you did know her?" "Yes, I did. She was a pretty girl, very polite. But that was many years ago, dear. Why do you ask?" Caleb hesitated. Something in Mrs. Higgins's tone made him suspicious, but he couldn't identify what. "Just curiosity. At the children's home, we never knew anything about our family." "I see," she said, but Caleb noticed she avoided saying more on the subject. After Mrs. Higgins left, Caleb grew thoughtful. Why had she acted strange when he mentioned his mother's name? And why didn't she say anything about what had happened to Sarah? That night, while Leo slept, Caleb read all the letters they had found. There were almost 20 letters, all written by their mother to Uncle Silas over 5 years. What they revealed was even worse than he had imagined. The Sterling family, Caleb discovered that Arthur was Sterling's son, had spread lies about Sarah in the community, saying she was a neglectful mother, that she drank, that she left her children alone to go out with men. None of it was true, but the lies were repeated so often that many people began to believe. The worst part was knowing that some people in the community, including Mrs. Higgins, knew the accusations were false but did nothing to defend her. In fact, one of the letters suggested that Mrs. Higgins had helped spread the gossip, perhaps out of jealousy or some old rivalry. One specific letter made Caleb's blood run cold. "Silas, I heard that Mrs. Higgins has been telling everyone she saw me coming home drunk last week. That's a lie. I was working late at Mrs. Bennet's house, caring for her sick mother. Mrs. Bennet can confirm this if anyone asks. I don't understand why Higgins is doing this to me. I've always been respectful to her. Could it be because of that old story with Walter? I was just a girl when that happened, and I never had anything with him even after she married him. I'm starting to think she's helping the Sterling family to harm me. Do you think it's possible?" Caleb reread the letter several times. So Mrs. Higgins really had taken part in the persecution against their mother, and now she was pretending to be a friend, acting as if she cared about the boys' well-being. But why? What did she gain from it? The answer came the next day, when Caleb woke to the sound of raised voices outside. Through the window he saw Mrs. Higgins and Arthur talking again, but this time the conversation seemed more tense. "You can't just take the children from here, Mr. Sterling." "Yes, I can, Mrs. Higgins. I have rights to this property, and those children have no way to prove they're really related to Silas. But the will can be contested, and it will be, you can be sure. And then? What do you intend to do with the land?" Caleb strained his ears. That was the important question. "What I've always wanted to do, Mrs. Higgins, expand my property. This land borders mine, and I need it for the cattle-raising project I'm planning." "And my part of the deal?" Caleb felt his stomach turn. So Mrs. Higgins really was involved in some scheme with Arthur. "You'll get your share, as we agreed, but you need to help me convince social services that these children aren't safe here." I don't know if I can do that, Mr. Sterling. They're just boys. You should have thought of that before accepting the deal, Mrs. Higgins. Or did you forget that you were the one who told me about the will even before it was officially read?" Caleb leaned against the wall, trying to process what he had just heard. Mrs. Higgins had betrayed great-great-uncle Silas's trust, revealing the contents of the will to Arthur even before the old man's passing. And now she was being blackmailed into helping to get them off the property. "Leo," he whispered, gently shaking his brother, "wake up, but don't make a sound." "What is it?" murmured Leo, still sleepy. "We have to get out of here now. I'll explain later." Quickly, Caleb gathered the most important letters and photos and put them in a backpack. He woke Leo fully and explained in whispers what he had discovered. "But where will we go?" asked Leo, frightened. "To the barn. We can hide there until I figure out what to do." They slipped out the back door and ran to the barn, entering through the side door they had forced open the day before. Caleb locked the door from the inside using a piece of wood as a bar. "Caleb, I'm scared," said Leo. "I know, Leo, I am too, but we'll figure something out." They climbed up to the barn loft, where they could stay hidden and at the same time watch what was happening outside through a small window. It wasn't long before Arthur and Mrs. Higgins noticed the boys had disappeared from the house. "Where did they go?" Caleb heard him shout. "I don't know. They were just here." "Look for them. They can't have gone far." For nearly an hour, they watched the two figures searching the property, shouting the boys' names. Caleb signaled for Leo to stay quiet and keep down. That's when they heard footsteps approaching the barn. Someone tried to open the main door, which was padlocked. Then they tried the side door, but Caleb had barred it well. "Mr. Sterling," shouted Mrs. Higgins, "there's no one in the barn. Everything's locked." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. The locks are just as they've always been." Caleb breathed a sigh of relief. Mrs. Higgins didn't know they had managed to force the side door open. After a few more minutes of searching, he heard Arthur say, "They must have gone into town. I'll call social services and say the children ran away. That will help our argument that they aren't safe here alone. Mr. Sterling, I'm starting to think this is going too far." "It's too late for regrets now, Mrs. Higgins. You're already in this up to your neck." The footsteps retreated, and soon after Caleb heard a car driving away. "They're gone," he whispered to Leo. "Now what?" Caleb thought quickly. They needed help, but they didn't know who to trust. The lawyer who had delivered the will seemed to be on their side. But what if he was also involved in the scheme? And social services? If Arthur told them they had run away, they could be forced to go back to the orphanage. "We'll stay hidden here for now," he decided. "Let me think of a plan." They spent the rest of the day in the barn. Caleb went down a few times to get water from the outside tap and some leftover provisions from the house. Fortunately, Arthur and Mrs. Higgins did not return. At night, while Leo slept curled up in an old tarp they had found in the barn, Caleb continued reading his mother's letters by the light of a flashlight. It was in one of the last letters that he found the information that would change everything. "Silas, I managed to find out what really happened with Grandpa's seeds. Remember how we always wondered why he was so secretive about those plants? I spoke with Mrs. Weaver, who worked in his house for many years before she passed. She told me that Grandpa wasn't planting common herbs. They were very rare medicinal plants, some nearly extinct. He had seeds that had been passed down from generation to generation in our family, plants that the elders used to cure all kinds of illnesses. Mrs. Weaver said that Grandpa kept the seeds in a special place, inside clay pots buried behind the greenhouse. She saw him doing it several times. If this is true, Silas, our family might be sitting on a fortune. Rare medicinal plants are worth a lot of money these days, especially to labs and universities that study natural medicine. Maybe this is our chance for a fresh start. If I can get back, we can look for those seeds and plant everything again." Caleb's heart raced. So that was it. The precious seeds might still be buried behind the abandoned greenhouse. That's why Arthur wanted that property so badly. He must have known about the medicinal plants. But how could Caleb prove the seeds existed? And even if he found them, how could a 12-year-old boy protect them from greedy, well-connected adults? The answer came the next morning, from an unexpected source. Caleb was awakened by the sound of a pickup truck arriving. Carefully, he peeked through the small loft window and saw a middle-aged woman getting out of the vehicle. She wore simple but clean clothes and carried a document folder. "Caleb, Leo," she called out. "I'm Brenda, From the Social Welfare Office in Nashville. I received a report that you two ran away. Please come out, I won't hurt you. Caleb hesitated. Was this a trap set by Arthur? But the woman seemed genuinely concerned. I know you must be scared, Brenda continued, but I spoke with the lawyer handling the will, Mr. Harrison. He told me some interesting things about your family. Mr. Harrison. Caleb remembered the name. He was the lawyer who had delivered the inheritance papers. Maybe he wasn't involved in Arthur's scheme after all. Let me tell you something you might not know, said Brenda, moving closer to the barn. Mr. Harrison was a personal friend of your Uncle Silas. He was the one who told me the real story about your mother. Caleb decided to take a chance. He carefully unlocked the side door and stepped out, signaling for Leo to stay hidden. Here, he said quietly. Brenda turned and smiled. Caleb, right? You gave me such a fright. Why were you hiding? Are you really from social welfare? Yes, I am. Look, here's my identification. Caleb examined the document. It seemed genuine. What do you know about our mother? Brenda moved closer, speaking in a maternal tone. I know she didn't abandon you by choice, dear. I know she was forced to leave by bad people who spread lies about her. And I know your Uncle Silas spent years trying to find you to correct that injustice. How do you know this? Mr. Harrison showed me some letters your uncle left with him. Silas knew something might happen to him before he could bring you back, so he left instructions for Mr. Harrison to handle everything. What about Arthur? Do you know he wants to steal our property? Brenda sighed. Yes, I do. And I also know about Mrs. Higgins's involvement in all this. Mr. Harrison suspected something was wrong, which is why he called me to investigate. So, can we stay here? Yes, you can. But first I need to make sure you're truly safe. Mr. Harrison told me about some special plants that might be on this property. Is that true? Caleb hesitated again. How could he know if he could trust her completely? Let me get my brother first, he said. Leo came down from the loft, still frightened, but calmed down when he saw Caleb talking normally with the woman. Leo, this is Mrs. Brenda. She came to help us. Brenda crouched down to be at Leo's eye level. Hi, sweetie. I know you must be scared, but I came to help you stay here on your property, okay? Really? We won't have to go back to the orphanage? Not if I can help it, but I'll need your help for that. Caleb decided to tell Brenda everything, the letters they found, the conversation he overheard between Arthur and Mrs. Higgins, and the medicinal plants mentioned in their mother's letters. Brenda listened quietly, taking notes in a small notebook. Boys, do you have any idea how important what you just told me is? If these plants really exist, you not only can keep the property, but will also have the means to live well. But how are we going to prove the seeds exist? Asked Caleb. Leave that to me. I know people who understand medicinal plants. But first, let's look for those seeds your mother mentioned. They went together to the area behind the abandoned greenhouse. With the information from the letters, it wasn't hard to locate the spot where the clay pots might be buried. The soil was looser in one specific corner, as if it had been dug up and refilled several times. I'll get some tools from the barn, said Caleb. With old shovels they found, they began digging carefully. They didn't need to go very deep, about 20 inches below the surface. Caleb's shovel hit something hard. I found something. It was a clay pot the size of a small cooking pot, sealed with a clay lid and an old kind of wax. Inside the pot were several cloth bags, each containing different seeds. My God, whispered Brenda, you really found them. But it was upon opening one of the bags that her expression completely changed. Caleb, Leo, do you know what these seeds are? No, they answered together. These are seeds from plants that hardly exist anymore in Brazil. Some I've only seen in botany books. If they're still viable for planting, you have something in your hands that's worth a lot of money. How much? Asked Leo, curious. I'm not sure, but some of these varieties could be worth thousands of dollars per seed. And look how many you have here. Caleb felt a mix of joy and fear. Joy for finally finding the treasure his mother mentioned. Fear, because now they had something that people like Arthur would do anything to steal. What do we do now? He asked. First, We'll store these seeds in a safe place. Then I'll call an expert to confirm what I suspect. And finally, we'll handle the legal issues to make sure no one takes you away from here." But as they carefully stored the seeds in the house, none of them noticed someone watching from afar, hidden among the trees. Mrs. Higgins had seen everything. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Brenda slept in the house with the boys. She said it was to protect them, but Caleb suspected it was also to keep an eye on the seeds. Not that he distrusted her. Brenda seemed genuinely concerned for their well-being, but the years at the orphanage had taught Caleb to never let his guard down completely. The next morning, they were awakened by the sound of cars arriving. Through the window, Caleb saw 3 vehicles parking in front of the house: Arthur's car, another car he didn't recognize, and a white van with an official logo. "Miss Brenda," whispered Caleb, shaking the social worker, "I think we have trouble." Brenda got up quickly and looked out the window. "Damn," she murmured, "it's the social welfare supervisor and 2 people I don't know." Loud knocks on the door made Leo hide behind Caleb. "Brenda, open up. It's me, Mr. Miller." Brenda took a deep breath before opening the door. "Good morning, Supervisor." A burly man in his 50s entered the house without ceremony, followed by Arthur and a blonde woman in expensive clothes. "Brenda, what's this story about lost children?" "I received a serious complaint that you left your jurisdiction without authorization to interfere in a case that isn't yours." "Supervisor, I can explain." "There's no need to explain anything," interrupted the blonde woman. "I'm Ms. Crawford, attorney for Mr. Arthur Sterling. I'm here to inform you that the custody of these children has been revoked by court order." Caleb felt the floor vanish beneath his feet. "Revoked? How?" "Simple, kid. A judge decided you're not fit to stay here alone, especially after running away from home yesterday. You're going back to the children's home until you turn 18. "This can't be right," said Brenda. "A court decision can't be that fast." The lawyer showed some papers. "Yes, it can. An emergency injunction. The judge was clear. Orphaned children cannot stay without proper supervision in an isolated rural area." Caleb took the papers and tried to understand what was written, but the legal language was too complicated for him. "What about the inheritance?" he asked. About that," said Arthur, finally speaking. "We discovered that your so-called uncle's will has problems. He wasn't mentally competent to decide about inheritance when he signed the papers." "That's a lie," shouted Leo. "This house is ours." Arthur bent down, pretending sympathy. "Look, kid, I know you've grown attached to this place, but sometimes life isn't how we want it. At least at the children's home, you'll have guaranteed food and an education." "And what will happen to the property?" asked Caleb suspiciously. "Well, if the will is deemed invalid, the property goes to the closest legitimate heir. In this case, me, since I'm the great-great-nephew of Silas." Caleb looked at Brenda, hoping she would do something. But the social worker seemed lost, flipping through the papers the lawyer had brought. "Supervisor," said Brenda, "I need to check these documents more carefully. Something isn't right here." "There's nothing to check, Brenda. The decision is made. The children are coming with me now." "Can I at least keep them until tomorrow to get their things in order?" "No," said the lawyer. "The injunction is for immediate compliance." Caleb felt anger growing in his chest. Once again, adults were deciding his and Leo's life without them being able to do anything to defend themselves. "What if we don't want to go?" he asked, staring at Arthur. "Unfortunately, boys, you don't have a choice. You're minors." It was then that Caleb noticed something strange. Mrs. Higgins wasn't with Arthur, as she always was, and her car wasn't parked outside. "Where is Mrs. Higgins?" he asked. The supervisor frowned. "Who?" "The neighbor who lives next door. She was with Mr. Arthur yesterday." Arthur and the lawyer exchanged a quick glance. "Mrs. Higgins is traveling," said Arthur. "She went to visit some relatives." Caleb knew it was a lie. Mrs. Higgins had seen them find the seeds the day before. Something had happened to her, and Caleb was sure Arthur was involved. "Can I speak with my brother alone for a minute?" asked Caleb. "You may, but be quick," said the supervisor, checking his watch. Caleb took Leo to the bedroom and closed the door. "Leo, listen carefully to what I'm going to say. We'll have to go with them now, but this isn't over." "But Caleb, they're taking us back to the children's home." "I know, but I have a plan. Do you remember where we hid the seeds last night?" Leo nodded. After Brenda fell asleep, Caleb had taken some of the most important seeds from the jar and hidden them somewhere else, as a precaution. "When we get to the children's home, I'll find a way to escape and come back here. But you'll have to stay there and pretend everything's fine, understand?" "No, I don't want to be alone at the children's home again." "Leo, it's just for a few days. I promise I'll come back to get you. But someone needs to stay there so we don't raise suspicion." "What if you can't come back?" Caleb held his younger brother's shoulders firmly. "I will come back, Leo, I promise. We're all each other has in this world, remember? I'll never abandon you." Leo cried, but agreed to the plan. When they left the room, the adults were talking quietly near the door. "Are you sure the seeds are safe?" Caleb heard the lawyer ask. "We searched the whole house last night after Higgins told us," answered Arthur. "We didn't find anything." "They must have hidden them somewhere else," said the woman. "But with the children gone, we'll have time to search calmly." Caleb pretended he hadn't heard anything, but now he was sure. Arthur knew about the seeds and had done something to Mrs. Higgins to find out where they were. "Ready, boys?" asked the supervisor. "Can I grab some of our clothes?" asked Caleb. "Of course. Be quick." While stuffing a backpack with some of Leo's clothes, Caleb managed to discreetly take the map he had made, showing where the most important seeds were hidden. He folded the paper several times and hid it inside his sock. The trip back to Nashville was silent. Leo cried softly in the back seat of the official van, and Caleb looked out the window trying to memorize the way back to the farm. St. Jude's Children's Home hadn't changed at all in the 4 days they had been gone. The same cold hallways, the same smell of disinfectant, the same children with sad eyes. Mrs. Gable, the director, greeted the boys with an "I told you so" expression. "I hope you've learned your lesson," she said. "Sometimes we think the grass is greener on the other side, but in the end we find out our home is right here." Caleb didn't answer. He knew anything he said would be used against them. "Caleb will be in room 15, Leo in room 23, announced Mrs. Gable. "But we've always stayed together," protested Leo. "Not when you run away, Leo. You need to learn that actions have consequences." Caleb felt anger, but controlled himself. Separating them was part of the punishment, and if he caused trouble now, it would be even harder to carry out his escape plan. That night, after all the children had gone to sleep, Caleb stayed awake, planning. He knew the children's home routine well. Surveillance was lighter during the early morning shift, and there was a window in the back that was always unlocked because the latch was broken. Around 2 in the morning, when he was sure everyone was asleep, Caleb slipped silently out of his room. He quickly passed by Leo's room and left a note under the door. "Back soon, love you." He went out the back window and ran through the deserted streets until he reached the bus station. He had saved some money from small jobs he did at the children's home and managed to buy a ticket on the first bus heading to the farm region. The trip felt like an eternity. Caleb kept imagining what he would do if he got there and found Arthur waiting for him. Or worse, if he discovered Arthur had found the hidden seeds. He arrived in the small town nearest the farm as the sun was rising. He didn't have money for a taxi, so he decided to walk. It was almost 6 miles of dirt road, but Caleb was determined. During the walk, he passed by Arthur's farm. It was a huge, well-kept property with good-quality cattle grazing in neat pens. The main house looked like a mansion compared to the simple little house Caleb and Leo had inherited. That's when Caleb noticed something strange. Mrs. Higgins's old pickup truck was parked behind Arthur's house, half hidden among some trees. Caleb's heart raced. If Mrs. Higgins's car was there, where was she? And why had Arthur lied, saying she was traveling? Caleb hid behind a tree and watched the house for a few minutes. He saw no movement, but there was smoke coming from the chimney, indicating someone was awake. He decided to go around Arthur's property and head straight to the farm. There were more urgent matters to resolve first. When he finally reached the property that had been theirs, Caleb felt his chest tighten. The house door was open, and he could see it had been ransacked, furniture out of place, drawers open, papers scattered on the floor. He ran to the spot where he had hidden the seeds the night before. To his luck, they were still there, buried under a large rock near the chicken coop. But as he dug to get them, Caleb heard footsteps approaching. "I thought you'd come back here," said a familiar voice. Caleb turned and saw Arthur walking toward him, accompanied by two men Caleb didn't know. "Where are the seeds, kid?" "What seeds?" Caleb tried to buy time. "Don't play dumb with me. Higgins told me everything before. Well, before she decided it was better to stay quiet forever." Caleb's blood ran cold. The way Arthur spoke about Mrs. Higgins left no doubt that something terrible had happened to her. "What did you do to Mrs. Higgins?" "Nothing she didn't deserve, kid. The woman was getting too nervous, wanting to back out of the deal. I couldn't let that happen." One of the men with Arthur moved closer to Caleb. "Boss, you want me to search the kid for the seeds?" "Not yet, Butch. First, let's give him a chance to cooperate voluntarily." Caleb looked around, searching for an escape route. He was surrounded, and the three men were much bigger than him. "If I give you the seeds, will you leave me and my brother alone?" Arthur laughed. "Ah, kid, you're still so naive. After what you know about me, do you really think I'll let you walk around gossiping?" "No one will believe two orphan kids against a rich farmer," said Caleb, trying to appeal to logic. "Maybe you're right, but I'd rather not take the risk." That's when Caleb heard the sound of an engine approaching. Another car was arriving at the property. "Damn," muttered Arthur. "Who is it now?" The car stopped near the house, and to everyone's surprise, who stepped out was Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, accompanied by Brenda and two uniformed men. "Arthur Sterling," shouted Mr. Harrison, "you're under arrest." "Under arrest? For what?" Arthur tried to sound indignant, but Caleb noticed the nervousness in his voice. "Forgery of public documents, threats to minors, and we have strong suspicions of involvement in the disappearance of Eleanor Higgins." The two uniformed men approached Arthur and his henchmen. Caleb realized they were security agents, not regular police officers. "Caleb!" shouted Brenda, running toward him. "Are you okay?" "I am. But what's happening?" "Mr. Harrison discovered the documents Arthur's lawyer presented were fake. There's no court order at all taking you from the property." "And Mrs. Higgins?" Mr. Harrison approached with a serious expression. "We found her locked in a room at the back of Arthur's house. She was hurt and very scared, but she's alive." Caleb felt enormous relief. At least Mrs. Higgins was okay. "She told us everything," continued Mr. Harrison. "How Arthur blackmailed her to reveal information about the will. How he invented the story about her traveling to hide that he had kidnapped her when he found out she wanted to back out of the deal." "And the seeds?" asked Caleb. "What seeds?" asked Brenda. Caleb hesitated. Even with Arthur being arrested, he didn't know if he could completely trust the adults. But he didn't have much choice. He told them about the seeds they had found and how he had hidden them, Mr. Harrison and Brenda were impressed when they saw the little treasure Caleb had preserved. "Caleb, do you have any idea what you saved?" said Mr. Harrison. "Some of these seeds are from plants that don't exist anywhere else in the country. Are they really worth a lot of money?" "A lot, but it's not just that. The scientific value is even greater. With these seeds, you can rebuild the medicinal garden your great-grandfather kept. And no one will try to steal them from us again?" "Not if I can help it," said Mr. Harrison firmly. "I'll make sure all the paperwork is filed correctly. This property is rightfully yours, and no one is going to take it from you." Arthur and his henchmen were taken away by the security agents. Before getting into the car, Arthur yelled at Caleb, "This isn't over, boy. I have lawyers who will prove this land is mine." "Forget it, Arthur," replied Mr. Harrison. "When you get out of jail, if you get out, your lands will have to be sold to pay for the damages from the crimes you committed." Brenda took Caleb back to Nashville to get Leo. On the way, she explained that she had spent the whole night investigating the documents Arthur's lawyer had presented. "I spoke with the judge who supposedly signed the injunction. He had never seen those papers in his life. Everything was forged." "And now? Can we go back to the farm?" "Yes, you can, but you won't be alone there. Mr. Harrison got a special authorization for you to stay under my temporary supervision. I'll visit you every week to make sure you're okay. And school? I've already taken care of that too. There's a school in the nearest small town that accepts students from rural areas. You'll be able to study and keep living on your property. When they arrived at the children's home, Leo almost fainted with relief upon seeing Caleb. "I knew you'd come back," he said, hugging his brother tightly. "I promised I would, right? Now let's go home." Our home. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Brenda handled all the paperwork to officially remove the boys from the children's home. Mr. Harrison showed up with documents formalizing Brenda's temporary custody of them. Mrs. Gable, the director, didn't seem very pleased with the situation. "I hope you don't regret this later," she said. "Orphan children need structure, not an adventure in the woods." Caleb didn't bother to reply. He knew Mrs. Gable was wrong, and he also knew that some people can never understand that sometimes home isn't a place with strict rules and schedules, but a place where you can be who you really are. On the way back to the farm, they stopped at Arthur's house to visit Mrs. Higgins. The elderly woman was in a temporary wheelchair. She had twisted her ankle trying to escape from the room where she was locked. But her expression had completely changed. There was no longer the falseness Caleb had noticed before. "Boys," she said with tears in her eyes, "forgive me. Forgive me for everything." Caleb approached the wheelchair. "You were afraid of Arthur, weren't you?" "Yes, I was, dear. But that doesn't justify what I did to your mother so many years ago, nor what I try to do now." "Why did you do that to our mother?" Mrs. Higgins took a deep breath. "Out of jealousy, Caleb. The silly jealousy of an old, bitter woman. Your mother was young, beautiful, educated, and I've always been like this, ugly and alone. When Walter, my husband, started talking about how Sarah was such an admirable young woman, I felt a terrible envy." "But she never did anything with Mr. Walter, did she?" "Never. Your mother was always respectful and proper." "But I let jealousy take over me. When the Sterling family started making up lies about her, I saw an opportunity to get revenge for those bad feelings I had created myself." Leo, who had been listening quietly, asked, "And now, do you still feel anger toward our mother?" "No, dear. Now I only feel shame. Shame and a desire to fix what I did wrong." "How?" Mrs. Higgins looked at Mr. Harrison. "Doctor, those letters I wrote back then confessing that I had made up the stories about Sarah, do you still have them?" "Yes, I do. They are kept in my office." "Then use them. Use them to clear the boy's mother's name, and if you need me to confirm everything officially, I will do it." Caleb felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't complete forgiveness. Mrs. Higgins had caused a lot of suffering for their family, but it was the beginning of something. Perhaps the possibility that the wrongs of the past could be made right. "Mrs. Higgins, do you know if our mother is still alive?" "I'm not sure, dear, but I know that the last time anyone had news of her, she was living in a small town upstate. A friend of mine saw her working at a school there about 5 years ago." Caleb's heart raced. "Do you remember the name of the town?" "Bardstown, I think, or a town near there." Mr. Harrison wrote the information down in a notebook. "I'll look into this, boys. If your mother is alive and wants to see you again, I'll do everything I can to make it happen." When they finally returned to the farm, the sun was setting. The property seemed different now that they knew it was truly theirs. The house had been tidied up. Brenda had called some people to put everything back in order after the mess Arthur had made. "First, let's have dinner," said Brenda. "Then you show me these famous seeds." While Brenda prepared a soup with the groceries she had brought from Nashville, Caleb and Leo went to the hiding place to get the seeds. "Caleb," said Leo when they were alone, "do you think our mother will want to see us?" "I don't know, Leo. It's been a long time. She must have changed, and we have too. But if she doesn't want to, it's okay. We have each other, and now we have this house too. And if she does?" Caleb smiled. "Then we'll have a real family for the first time." They returned to the house, carefully carrying the jar with the seeds. Brenda examined them one by one in the lamplight, comparing them with some information she had researched on her phone. "Caleb, Leo, you know you've found a real treasure, right? Some of these varieties are considered extinct for decades. And now what do we do with them? First, we'll plant some to make sure they aren't lost. Then we'll look for people who understand native plant preservation to help us take care of them properly. And will we be able to make money from them? Brenda laughed. Yes, you will, but you'll discover that the real value isn't the money. It's the opportunity to bring back plants that can help a lot of people, and to continue the work your great-grandfather started. That night, for the first time since they could remember, Caleb and Leo slept in a house that was truly theirs, surrounded by things that belonged to their family, knowing that no one could take them away from there. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, they were awakened by Brenda, gently shaking Caleb. "Caleb, wake up. There's something you need to know." "What is it?" "Mr. Harrison called early. He managed to locate your mother." Caleb sat up in bed immediately. "He did? Where is she?" "In a town called Danville, about 3 hours from here. She works as a teacher at a rural school." And does she know that he found us?" Brenda hesitated. "She does. Mr. Harrison spoke with her on the phone last night." "And what did she say?" "She cried a lot, Caleb. Said she spent all these years looking for you, but could never find out which children's home you were in. Does she want to see us?" "Yes, she does. She's coming here this afternoon." Leo, who had woken up during the conversation, was silent for a moment. "Caleb, what if she doesn't like us anymore?" "Then we keep taking care of each other, like we always have," Caleb answered, but his voice was shaky. The day passed slowly. Caleb tried to keep his mind busy by organizing the barn and tending to the chickens, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he would say to his mother. So many questions, so many years of abandonment that they now discovered hadn't been real abandonment after all. Around 3 in the afternoon, they heard the sound of a car approaching. Caleb and Leo ran to the window and saw a woman in her 40s getting out of a small car. She had brown hair with some grey streaks, and when she looked toward the house, Caleb immediately recognized his own eyes reflected in her face. "It's her," whispered Leo. The woman walked slowly toward the house, as if each step was hard to take. She paused for a moment on the porch, took a deep breath and knocked gently on the door. Brenda opened it. "Sarah." "Yes." Are they?" Caleb and Leo appeared behind Brenda. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Mother and sons looked at each other in silence, trying to find in each other the faces that had remained only in memory. "My boys," whispered Sarah, and her voice broke. "My babies." It was Leo who moved first. He ran to his mother and hugged her with all his might, crying. Caleb stood still for a few more seconds, but when he saw his mother reach out her arm toward him, all the anger he had held on to for years melted away. The hug of the three lasted a long time. Caleb smelled his mother's perfume, different but somehow familiar, and realized he was crying too. "Forgive me," said Sarah when they finally separated. "Forgive me for not being strong enough to fight for you." "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom," said Leo, using the word Mom for the first time Caleb could remember. "Yes, I did, my love. I could have fought harder. I could have looked for you in other ways. But I was so afraid." "Afraid of what?" asked Caleb. "Afraid that you would hate me for leaving. Afraid that you had already forgotten me. And afraid of the Sterling family, who always said that if I came back, they would do something bad to me." "But now Arthur is in jail," said Caleb. "I know. Mr. Harrison told me everything on the phone. He also told me about the seeds you found, about the barn, about how brave you were to protect the family inheritance." Sarah looked around the property. "This house, it's still the same as when I was a child. I lived here until I was 15, when my parents passed away and I went to live with an aunt in the city." "And then you met our father?" asked Leo. Sarah smiled sadly. "I did. Sterling was a handsome, polite young man when we were young. But after we got married, he changed. His family never accepted me because I was poor and an orphan." "What happened to him?" "I don't know, my darlings. After I left, I never heard from him again. Mr. Harrison said he passed away a few years ago, but I didn't know at the time." Caleb felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, Relief because he wouldn't have to deal with another complicated adult in his life. Sadness because he could never know his father, even if he had become a bad person. "Mom," said Leo, "are you going to stay here with us now?" Sarah looked at Brenda, who had discreetly stayed at the back of the porch. "If Brenda allows it, and if you want me to, I would very much like to stay. I can request a transfer to a school closer to here." "We want you to," said Leo immediately. Caleb took a little longer to respond, not because he didn't want his mother to stay, but because he was still processing the idea of having a real family after so many years. "Caleb?" asked Sarah delicately. "What do you think?" I think it would be good, but it will be strange at first." "It will," agreed Sarah. "For me too. You've grown so much. You're people I don't know yet. We'll have to learn how to be a family." "How?" "Slowly. With patience. Making mistakes and getting things right, like all families do." Brenda approached the group. "Sarah, if you decide to stay together here, I'll need to take care of some official paperwork. The boy's custody will have to be transferred to you, and we'll need a social evaluation to make sure everything is in order." "I understand. I'll do whatever is necessary. And there's something else." "Something?" "The seeds the boys found will need special care. Maybe it's a good idea to turn this into an official preservation project." "How so?" "There are government and university programs that support this kind of work. You could receive technical and even financial help to set up a real native plant preservation center." Caleb got excited about the possibility. "We could help save plants that are almost extinct." "Exactly. And you'd be continuing the work your great-grandfather started." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about the future. Sarah told them about the years she spent searching for her sons, about the jobs she had, about the nights she cried thinking of them. Caleb and Leo told her about life at the children's home, about the difficult moments, but also about how they always took care of each other. "You've become such brave men," said Sarah. "I'm proud of you, even though I lost the chance to see you grow up." "You didn't lose it, Mom," said Caleb, surprising himself by using the word Mom. "We're still growing, and now you can see." That night, Sarah slept in the room that had been hers as a child. Caleb and Leo stayed in their room, but left the doors open. It was strange to know there was someone else in the house, but it was a good kind of strange. In the morning, Caleb woke up to the smell of coffee and warm bread. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Good morning, my love." "Good morning, Mom." It was easier to say the word now, as if a part of Caleb that had been asleep for years had finally woken up. "Did you sleep well?" "I did. And you?" "It was the first night I've slept peacefully in many years." During breakfast, Sarah showed some old photos she had brought, photos of when Caleb and Leo were babies, photos of the family before everything went wrong. "This one is from Leo's first birthday," she said, showing a photo of a chubby baby waving his little hands at a young woman holding a simple cake. Leo laughed. "I was chubby. You were the most beautiful baby in the world," said Sarah, kissing his forehead. Caleb looked at all the photos carefully. In some, he saw himself as a small child smiling at the camera. He didn't remember those moments, but somehow they felt familiar. "Mum, why did you keep these photos?" "Because they were the only thing I had left of you. I took them everywhere I lived these years." After breakfast, they went together to visit the garden where they had found the seeds. Sarah knew that place well. "My grandfather spent hours here every day," she told them. "He said plants were like people. Each one had its own personality, its needs, its secrets." "And he taught you that?" "He did. I was very little, but I remember some things he showed me." "Maybe I can help you plant the seeds you found." They spent the morning preparing some beds to plant the first seeds. It was delicate work. Many of those varieties had specific needs for soil, water, and light. "This one," said Sarah, holding a small, dark seed carefully, "if I'm not mistaken, is heart of the field. My grandfather used to say it was the hardest plant to grow, but also the most powerful for healing heartache." "Heartache?" asked Leo. "Not just physical pain, my dear. Soul pain, too. Sadness, hurt, longing. The tea from this plant helped people feel better." Caleb thought maybe the whole family could use a little of that tea. Around noon, Mr. Harrison arrived with important news. "Sarah, I managed to get all the paperwork in order. The boy's custody has been officially transferred to you." "And there's more," he continued. "I spoke with a researcher from the State University of Kentucky about the seeds. He was very interested in partnering with you." "What kind of partnership?" asked Caleb. "They would provide technical assistance, equipment, and even a small scholarship for you to help with the preservation project. In return, some of the seeds and plants developed would be used for scientific research. And we'd keep the rest?" "You would, yes. And you could sell plants to nurseries and botanical gardens. Over time, this could become a very good source of income for the family." Sarah smiled. "My children are going to become scientists without even knowing it." "Actually, Mum, I've always liked plants," said Caleb. "At the children's home, I used to tend a small garden in the back. The other kids thought it was silly, but I liked watching things grow." "And I like animals," said Leo. "I can take care of the chickens, and maybe we can have other animals too." Mr. Harrison laughed. "Seems like you already have it all planned out." "One thing at a time," said Sarah. "First, let's get used to living together. Then we'll think about big projects." But fate had other plans to speed things up. The next day, two unexpected visitors arrived. One was the university researcher Mr. Harrison had mentioned, a middle-aged man named Professor Langston, who was ecstatic to see the seeds they had found. "My dears," he said, examining the seeds with a magnifying glass, "you have here varieties that science considered lost for at least 50 years. "Are they that important?" asked Leo. "They are so important that universities all over the world will want to study these plants. You may be contributing to discovering new medicines, new ways to cure diseases." The second visitor was even more unexpected, an elderly woman of about 80 who arrived in a pickup truck driven by a young man. "Mrs. Weaver," exclaimed Sarah upon seeing her, "I thought you had already—" "Passed away," laughed the old woman. "Not yet, my child. I still have a few things to do in this world." Mrs. Weaver was the same person who had worked for the great-great-uncle when Sarah was a child, the same one who had written about the special seeds in one of the letters Caleb had found. "I heard you found old Silas's treasure," said Mrs. Weaver, smiling. "I came to see if you need someone who knows the secrets of how to care for those plants." "You still remember?" asked Caleb. "I do remember, boy. I spent 50 years of my life learning from your great-great-uncle. I'm not taking that knowledge to the grave without passing it on to someone." And so, just like that, the family had grown even more. Mrs. Weaver moved into Mrs. Higgins's house, who had decided to go live with a niece in the city after everything that had happened. Professor Langston arranged for a mobile laboratory to be installed in part of the barn, turning the place into a true botanical research center. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just getting started. Now, continuing. 3 months later, life had completely transformed. The farm that once seemed abandoned was now buzzing with activity. Organized garden beds spread across the entire property, each dedicated to a different variety of medicinal plant. Caleb discovered he had a natural ability to understand the needs of plants, instinctively knowing when each one needed more or less water, sun, or shade. Leo proved to be an excellent animal caretaker. Besides the chickens, there were now ducks, some goats, and even an old horse that Professor Langston had given as a gift to the family. Sarah managed to transfer to the school in the nearest town and now taught in the mornings, spending her afternoons helping with the preservation project. Mrs. Weaver became the living memory of the place, teaching secrets about planting and preparing natural remedies that no one else knew. But life wasn't free of problems. One afternoon, as Caleb was watering the more delicate plant beds, he noticed some of them had yellowed, wilted leaves. It didn't seem like a lack of water. He had watered them normally the night before. "Mrs. Weaver," he called, worried, "come look at this." The elderly woman approached and examined the plants carefully. She murmured. "This isn't a disease, boy. Someone put something in the soil." "Something like what?" "Salt, probably, or some plant poison." Caleb felt his stomach turn. Who would do such a thing? "Let's tell Mom and Professor Langston," he said. When everyone gathered around the affected beds, the concern was universal. If someone was sabotaging the plants, the entire project was at risk. "We need to find out who's doing this," said Sarah. "But how?" asked Leo. "I'll keep watch at night," decided Caleb. "Absolutely not," said Sarah immediately. "You're only 12. If there's someone causing trouble around here, it's dangerous." "Then what are we going to do?" It was Professor Langston who had an idea. "Let's install some discreet cameras. I have access to university equipment that can help." 2 nights later, the cameras caught the saboteur. To everyone's surprise, it wasn't an adult as they had expected. It was a boy of about 15, whom Caleb didn't recognize. "Who could it be?" asked Leo, looking at the recording on Professor Langston's laptop. "I'll find out," said Caleb, determined. The following night, instead of letting the cameras record alone, Caleb hid behind the barn and waited. He had arranged with Leo that if he didn't return in 2 hours, Leo should wake their mother. Around midnight, Caleb saw a small figure jumping the fence at the back of the property. It was the same boy from the cameras. Caleb waited until he approached the plant beds, then turned on a flashlight. "Stop right there." The boy was startled and stumbled, dropping a bottle he was carrying. "Who are you? Why are you doing this to our plants?" The boy, who appeared to be about 15 and visibly underfed, looked at Caleb with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I'm nobody, and you can't prove anything." "Yes, I can. I have footage of you throwing poison here." The boy's expression changed. The defiance turned to desperation. "Please don't tell anyone. If my boss finds out I got caught, he'll fire me." "Your boss? Who's your boss?" "I can't say." Caleb moved closer and noticed the boy was trembling. It wasn't just from the cold, it was from fear. "Look, I'm not going to call anyone right now. But you need to tell me what's going on." The boy hesitated for a few moments before speaking. "My name is Toby. I work on a farm nearby. My boss sent me here to ruin your plants." "Why?" "I don't really know. He just said you were bothering important people, and that if I didn't do what he told me, he'd fire me without paying what he owes me." "Who is your boss?" "Mr. Thorne. He has a big farm on the other side of the road." Caleb knew the property. It was one of the largest in the region, specializing in cattle raising. "And what else did he tell you to do?" "Just that. Come here 3 times a week and throw salt on the flower beds. He said it was to scare you, to make you stop messing with plants." Caleb thought quickly. Why would a cattle rancher care about medicinal plants? Unless... "Toby, does this boss of yours know Arthur Sterling?" The boy was startled. "Yes, he does. They're very good friends. Mr. Thorne got very angry when he found out Mr. Sterling was arrested." Now it all made sense. Thorne must have been trying to avenge his friend, or perhaps he also had an interest in the medicinal plants and the family's land. "Toby, do you have a place to live if you stop working for this man?" "No, I don't. I live in a little room in the back of his farm. I have no family, no money saved." Caleb looked at the skinny, frightened boy in front of him. He remembered himself and Leo a few months ago. Orphans with no one, depending on the kindness or cruelty of adults. "Do you want to stay here with us tonight? Tomorrow we'll talk with my mom and see what we can do." "You're not going to turn me in?" "No. You were just following orders so you wouldn't be out of work. I understand that." Toby accepted the offer, and Caleb took him to the barn, where he improvised a bed with some tarps and old blankets. The next morning, Toby woke up to the smell of coffee and warm bread coming from the house. He couldn't remember the last time he had smelled home-cooked food. Caleb explained the situation to the family during breakfast. Sarah, as Caleb had expected, was immediately concerned about Toby. "How old are you, son?" 15, ma'am." "And you really have no family?" "No, ma'am. My parents passed away when I was 10. Since then, I've been going from farm to farm, working in exchange for food and a place to sleep." Mrs. Weaver got up and served Toby a generous plate of food. "Eat up, boy, you're much too thin." While Toby ate as if he hadn't seen food in days, the family discussed what to do about the situation. "We need to resolve this issue with Mr. Thorne," said Professor Langston. "He can't keep sabotaging our project." "And we need to help Toby too," said Leo. "He's not at fault for any of this." "I agree," said Sarah. "But first, let's talk to Mr. Harrison about the legal side of all this." Mr. Harrison arrived at the property before lunch. After hearing the whole story, he was thoughtful for a few minutes. Regarding Mr. Thorne, we'll file an official complaint for sabotage. With the evidence you have, he'll have to answer for it. And what about Toby? That situation is more complicated. He's a minor. His documents aren't in order. He has no legal guardian. Technically, he should go to a shelter. Toby paled. Please, don't send me to a shelter. I work. I can manage on my own. Calm down, Toby, said Sarah gently. No one is sending you anywhere you don't want to go. We'll figure something out. Mr. Harrison smiled. Actually, there is a possibility. If a family is willing to assume temporary custody of Toby while we sort out his situation, he can stay. We want to, said Leo immediately. Leo's right, agreed Caleb. Toby can stay here. There's room, there's work, and he already knows about farming. Sarah looked at Toby, who was visibly emotional. What do you think, Toby? Do you want to stay here with us? I'd really like to, Mrs. Sarah, but I don't want to be a bother. A bother? Laughed Mrs. Weaver. Son, you're going to be a big help. There's so much work here even the birds are pitching in. And so the family grew once more. Toby quickly adapted to the routine of the property. He discovered he had a talent for carpentry and began building greenhouses and beds more suitable for the special plants. But the situation with Mr. Thorne was far from resolved. A week later, Mr. Harrison returned with news about the investigation. The sheriff went to Thorne's farm, but he denied everything, said Toby is a liar, and that he never sent anyone to sabotage anything. And now Toby will have to testify officially. It's his word against Thorne's. But Toby is a minor and has no documents. Who will believe him? Asked Sarah, worried. That's just it. I discovered something interesting about this Thorne. He has a history of labor problems. He's been accused several times of exploiting minors under irregular conditions. So Toby isn't the first? No, and he possibly wouldn't be the last if we don't stop this now. Professor Langston, who had been quiet during the conversation, spoke. I have an idea. What if we recorded Thorne himself confessing what he did? How? Toby could go back to his farm, pretend he's still working for him, and use a hidden recorder to capture some incriminating conversation. Absolutely not, said Sarah immediately. It's too dangerous. If Thorne finds out, he could hurt Toby. I don't mind, said Toby. If this can stop other boys from going through what I went through, I'll do it. Toby, you're brave. But Sarah is right, said Mr. Harrison. It's too risky. Caleb, who had been listening quietly to everything, had an idea. What if we recorded him right here? If he came to our property and said something incriminating? How would we do that? Toby could call him and say he discovered something important about our family, something Thorne would want to know. What kind of thing? Caleb smiled. That we're planning to sell the property and leave the area. Thorne would want to confirm that in person. Mr. Harrison thought about the proposal. It could work, but you'd have to be prepared for anything, and the recordings would need to be done legally to be used as evidence. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning every detail. Toby would call Thorne the next day, telling him he'd overheard family conversations about selling the property. Thorne would probably come to verify personally, and when he arrived he'd find hidden cameras and recorders ready to capture any incriminating thing he said. And if he doesn't say anything incriminating? Asked Leo. Then we'll try to provoke him, said Caleb. Talk about Arthur, about the plants, about the problems he's caused. Eventually he'll say something useful. The next morning, Toby made the call. Hello, Mr. Thorne. It's Toby. I have something important to tell you. The family living on the farm you told me to attack, they're thinking of selling everything and leaving. It's true, yes, sir. I heard them talking last night. Okay, sir, you'll come here then. All right, I'll wait. When he hung up the phone, Toby was trembling. He's coming in an hour, said he wants to talk to me and see if he can talk to you all too about buying the property. Perfect, said Mr. Harrison. Now everyone to your places. The plan was simple. Mr. Harrison and Professor Langston would be hidden in the barn with recording equipment. Sarah would stay in the house with Leo, ready to call for help if needed. Caleb and Toby would receive Mr. Thorne in the yard, trying to get him to talk about what he had ordered Toby to do. When Mr. Thorne's pickup truck arrived, Caleb felt his heart race. He was a large, intimidating man with an unfriendly face. "Where's Toby?" he asked, getting out of the car. "Right here, Mr. Thorne," replied Toby nervously. "And this family that wants to sell the property?" Caleb stepped forward. "That's us, sir. My mother is talking about selling and leaving." Mr. Thorne looked around the property with interest. "Is that so? And why this sudden decision?" "Oh, a lot of people have been bothering us here. People wanting to buy, others trying to sabotage our work. My mother thought it best to leave." "Sabotage how?" Caleb exchanged a look with Toby. "Someone was coming here at night and throwing salt on our plants. Killed several of them." Mr. Thorne let out a low chuckle. "Is that so? How strange. And you don't know who it was?" "We have no idea," lied Caleb. "Was it you who did this?" "Me? Why would I do something like that? I don't know. Maybe because you're a friend of Arthur Sterling who tried to steal our inheritance." Mr. Thorne's expression hardened. "Who said I'm a friend of Arthur's?" "Everyone around here knows," said Toby, joining the conversation. "You got really angry when he was arrested." "And I would be," exploded Mr. Thorne. "Arthur is an honest man who was persecuted because of two kids who don't even know who they really are." "What do you mean?" asked Caleb. "You think you're the true heirs of Silas? Arthur told me the truth. You're just orphans, someone trained to pretend you're from the family." "That's not true." "Yes, it is. And the plants you found aren't yours either. They've belonged to the Sterling family for generations." Caleb kept pushing. "If you're so sure about that, why did you order Toby to sabotage our plants? Why not go straight to the courts?" Mr. Thorne stopped talking and looked suspiciously at Toby, then at Caleb. "Who said I ordered anyone to sabotage anything?" "No one said," Caleb replied quickly. "But you were talking as if you knew something." "I don't know anything. And you, Toby, what have you been telling this boy?" Toby swallowed hard. "Nothing, Mr. Thorne. I just said you were angry about Mr. Arthur's arrest. Was that really all?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Thorne fell silent for a few moments, looking from one to the other. Caleb realized he was suspecting something. "You know what?" Mr. Thorne said finally. "I've changed my mind about buying this property. There's something strange going on here." And with those words, he returned to his pickup truck and drove away. "Darn," murmured Caleb. "I think he got suspicious." Mr. Harrison and Professor Langston came out of the barn. "We managed to record everything," said Mr. Harrison, "and although he didn't confess directly, he said some things that could be useful." "Like what?" "The part about the plants belonging to the Sterling family for generations. That shows he knows about the existence of the special plants, which contradicts the version that he never had any interest in your property." "It's not much," said Professor Langston. "Yeah, but it's a start. And there's one more thing. Did you notice how he reacted when Toby talked about him being angry about Arthur's arrest? He didn't deny it. In fact, he confirmed it." 2 hours later, Mr. Harrison received a phone call that would change everything. "It was the sheriff," he said, putting away his phone. "Mr. Thorne just went to the police station to file a complaint against you." "A complaint about what?" asked Sarah. "He says Toby is his employee whom you kidnapped, and that Caleb tried to blackmail him with illegal recordings. But that's a lie." "I know, but now we're going to have to prove it. Toby, do you have any document proving you worked for Mr. Thorne?" "No, sir. He never gave me anything in writing." "And payment, how did he pay you?" "He didn't pay. He only gave me food and the little room to sleep in. He always said he was deducting because I broke something or did some job poorly." Mr. Harrison shook his head. "That's disguised slave labor. Shall use this information." "And now?" asked Caleb. "Now we'll have to go to the police station to clear everything up, and hope the officer is sensible enough to see who is lying." The trip to the police station was tense. Mr. Thorne had arrived before them, and had already given his version of the facts to the officer, a middle-aged man named Rodriguez. "So," said the officer, looking at the group, "Mr. Thorne claims that you kidnapped his employee and tried to blackmail him with fake recordings." "Officer," said Mr. Harrison. "My client has proof that Toby was being exploited under slave labor conditions and that he was forced to sabotage their property on Mr. Thorne's orders." "Slave labor?" The officer became interested. "What kind of proof?" Mr. Harrison presented the recordings they had made, the footage of Toby sabotaging the plants, and Toby's own testimony about the conditions he lived under at Mr. Thorne's farm. The officer listened to everything carefully. "Toby," he said finally, "do you confirm that you never received cash payment from Mr. Thorne?" "I confirm, yes, sir. He always said I owed him for food and housing." "And do you confirm that he ordered you to sabotage the family's plants?" Toby looked nervously at Mr. Thorne, who was glaring at him angrily. "I confirm, officer." "Lies!" shouted Mr. Thorne. "This boy is being manipulated by these people." "Mr. Thorne," said the officer calmly, "can you prove that you paid a salary to Toby?" Well, it was an informal agreement. An informal agreement with a minor without regular documents?" Mr. Thorne was left speechless. "And about the sabotage? Do you deny ordering Toby to do this?" "I completely deny it." "Then how do you explain that Toby knew exactly where to attack the plants and what kind of substance to use?" "This information is in the recordings he made during the attacks." Mr. Harrison had prepared the case well. The evidence was solid, and Mr. Thorne was contradicting himself with every answer. At the end of the hearing, the officer made his decision. "Mr. Thorne, you are under arrest for slave labor and sabotage. Toby, you are free of any charges and will be placed with the family who offered to care for you." When they left the police station, Caleb finally managed to breathe a sigh of relief. One more problem had been solved. "Toby," said Sarah, "now you can stay with us officially. Mr. Harrison will handle the guardianship paperwork." "Thank you, Mrs. Sarah. Thank you, all of you. I never thought I could have a real family." "We didn't either," said Leo. "But we discovered that family isn't just who you're born with. It's who chooses to stay together." That night, as the whole family dined around the kitchen table, Sarah, Caleb, Leo, Toby, and Mrs. Weaver, Caleb looked around and realized how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he and Leo were just two hopeless orphans in a children's home. Now they had a mother, a home, a life plan, and even an older brother they had chosen. "You know," he said suddenly, "I think Uncle Silas knew this would happen." "How so?" asked Sarah. "He didn't leave the inheritance just for me and Leo. He left it for our family. And family, as Leo said, isn't just who you're born with. It's who chooses to stay together," Toby completed, smiling. Mrs. Weaver wiped a tear from her face. "Your great-great-uncle would be proud of you, boys, very proud." But there was still one surprise waiting in the future. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning, Caleb was in the garden, tending to a bed of still very young plants, when he saw an unfamiliar pickup truck approaching the house. "Mom!" he shouted. "Someone's coming!" Sarah came out of the house, drying her hands on her apron. When she saw who was getting out of the truck, she stopped immediately. It was a woman about 60 years old with completely white hair and kind eyes. But she wasn't a stranger. "Mother," whispered Sarah. "My daughter," replied the woman, running toward Sarah. Caleb was paralyzed. A grandmother. He had a grandmother. The woman hugged Sarah for long minutes, both of them crying. Then she pulled away and looked toward Caleb, Leo, and Toby, who had curiously approached. "Are these my grandchildren?" she asked. "Yes, Mother, Caleb and Leo, and this is Toby, whom we adopted." The woman approached the boys and looked at them carefully. "My God, how you've grown. The last time I saw you, you were tiny little babies." "Are you our grandma?" asked Leo shyly. "Yes, my dear. I'm Grandma Rose. I spent years looking for you." Caleb, still processing the situation, asked, "Why didn't you ever find us before?" "Because they told me you had been adopted by a wealthy family from São Paulo," replied Rose, anger in her voice. "Years went by trying to locate that family, until I discovered it was all a lie." "How did you find out?" "Through the newspaper article about you that came out in the regional paper, about the Medicinal Plants Project." Caleb remembered. 2 weeks earlier, a journalist had visited the property to do a story on the work they were developing with the rare seeds. The article had been published with photos of the whole family. "When I saw your photo in the paper, I almost fainted," continued Rose. "I chased down information and discovered the whole truth about what the Sterling family had done." "Where have you been living all this time?" "In Washington, D.C., working as a housekeeper. I never stopped looking for you and for Sarah. Every weekend I went to a different town showing old photos of you, asking if anyone knew you." Sarah took her mother's hand. "Mother, you can stay here with us now. Forever." "Can I really, daughter? I won't get in the way of your project." "Get in the way?" laughed Mrs. Weaver, who had come out of the house upon hearing the voices. "Rose, you've arrived just in time. We needed someone else to help organize all these children." And so, the family grew once more. Rose adapted quickly to life on the farm. She discovered she had a special talent for cooking with the medicinal herbs they grew, creating tasty and nutritious dishes. The native plant preservation project continued to grow. Universities from other states began to take an interest in the work they were developing, and delegations of researchers visited the property regularly. Caleb, now 13, had become a kind of child expert on medicinal plants. Leo, at 11, took care of a small farm that included chickens, ducks, goats, and a pig he had named Napoleon. Toby, at 16, built greenhouses and equipment for the lab, in addition to helping with the research. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. One December afternoon, exactly 1 year after they had inherited the property, Mr. Harrison appeared with extraordinary news. "Everyone," he said, barely able to contain his excitement, "you won't believe what I've discovered." "What is it this time?" asked Sarah, smiling. "Remember that plant you call love of the field, the one Rose said was good for curing heartache?" "I remember," said Caleb. "We managed to make seedlings, and some are already flowering." "Well then, Professor Langston took samples of that plant for analysis at a lab in Sao Paulo. The results came in today." "Well?" "The plant contains chemical compounds that could be revolutionary in treating depression and anxiety. Compounds that don't exist in any other plant known to science." Everyone fell silent, processing the information. "What does this mean?" asked Leo. "It means you might be contributing to saving millions of people who suffer from depression worldwide," replied Mr. Harrison. "And it also means the commercial value of these plants is much higher than we imagined." "How much higher?" asked Toby, curious. "Pharmaceutical labs are already offering millions of dollars just for the research rights. That's not even counting what you could earn from cultivating and selling the plants." Grandma Rose sat down heavily in a chair. "Millions?" "That's right. You've become millionaires and you didn't even know it." Caleb looked at his family around him. They all seemed as surprised as he was. "So now what?" Jenny asked. "Now you decide what you want to do," said Mr. Harrison. "You can sell everything and be rich forever, or you can keep the project as it is and earn money gradually while helping scientific research." The family gathered that night to talk about the future. Sitting on the house's porch, watching the stars, each one said what they thought. "I think we shouldn't sell everything at once," said Caleb. "The money will run out one day. But if we keep the project, we'll always have an income and we'll still be helping people." "I agree," said Leo. "And besides, I like taking care of the plants and the animals. If we get rich suddenly, maybe we'll lose the desire to work." "Toby, what do you think?" asked Sarah. "I think the same as the boys. I'd rather earn the money slowly, doing something useful, than be rich without doing anything." "Grandma Rose?" "Honey, after spending a whole life being poor, any money is already a blessing. The important thing is that you're together and happy." "Mrs. Weaver?" The old lady smiled. "Boys, your great-grandfather always said that the real treasure isn't what you keep, but what you plant. You've already planted much more than seeds. You've planted love, family, hope. The money is just a consequence." Sarah looked at everyone and made the decision. "Then it's decided. We'll keep the project, grow slowly, and use the money to improve our lives and help other people too." And so it was done. Part of the resources that started coming in was used to improve the property's infrastructure. They built a bigger house with comfortable bedrooms for everyone, a more modern laboratory, and even a small school where Caleb, Leo, and Toby studied with teachers who came from the city. Another part of the money was used to buy the neighboring properties that were for sale, expanding the preservation project. The old Sterling farm, which had been auctioned off to pay his debts, became a visitor center where people from all over the world came to learn about medicinal plants. But the most important thing was what they did with the old Thorn farm. They turned the place into a temporary home for at-risk miners, especially those who had been exploited in illegal labor in rural areas. Toby became the project coordinator, using his own experience to help other young people going through situations similar to what he had faced. "It's strange," he said to Caleb one day, while watching a group of boys who had just arrived at the home playing in the yard. 2 years ago I was in the same situation they are. Now I can help them." "It's not strange," Caleb replied. "It's perfect. You know exactly what they're feeling and what they need." 2 years had passed since that day that changed everything. Caleb, now 15, had become a recognized expert in medicinal plants, despite his young age. Universities offered him scholarships, but Caleb preferred to continue learning at home, surrounded by family. Leo, at 13, had expanded his passion for animals and now coordinated a project to preserve native animals of the Cerrado. Toby, at 18, divided his time between the children's home and the correspondence course in agronomy he was taking. Sarah had become the principal of the region's rural school, implementing a curriculum that included environmental education and sustainability. Grandma Rose handled the administrative side of the family's various projects, and Mrs. Weaver, at 83, continued to be the living memory of all the secrets about medicinal plants. But the best news was yet to come. One Friday morning, Mr. Harrison arrived at the property with an official envelope in his hands and a huge smile on his face. "Family," he announced, "I have news that will move you." "What is it this time?" asked Sarah. "Your project has just received the National Environmental Preservation Award. You will receive the honor in Washington, D.C., from the hands of the President of the Republic." Everyone was stunned. "Really?" asked Leo. "Really. And there's more. Along with the award comes funding of $5 million to expand the project to other regions of the country." Caleb felt tears in his eyes. Not of sadness, but of an emotion he couldn't name. It was pride, gratitude, happiness, all mixed together. "Do you know what this means?" he said to the family. "We started as 2 orphaned children who just wanted a place to call home. Now we are a family that can help the entire country." "And it all started with some old seeds in a clay pot," laughed Toby. "No," corrected Mrs. Weaver. "It all started with love. The seeds were just the means." The award ceremony in Washington, D.C. was moving. The entire family traveled to the capital. Caleb, Leo, Toby, Sarah, Grandma Rose, and Mrs. Weaver. Mr. Harrison and Professor Langston were also invited. In the presidential palace, surrounded by officials and journalists, Caleb was called to give a speech representing the family. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, nervous but determined. 3 years ago, my brother Leo and I were just 2 children in an orphanage, without family, without hope, without a future. Today we are here because we discovered that family isn't just who you're born with. It's who chooses to stay together. Our chosen family includes our mother, our grandmother, our adopted brother, our second grandmother in heart, and all the people who believed in us. But mainly, we are here because we learned that the real treasure isn't what we keep for ourselves. It's what we plant for others. The seeds our great-grandfather preserved were worthless kept in a pot. They only gained value when we planted them, cared for them, and shared them. This award isn't ours. It belongs to all the orphaned children who are still looking for a family. It belongs to all the exploited youth who need a second chance. It belongs to all the plants and animals that depend on us to survive. And it belongs to everyone who believes that, no matter where you come from, it's always possible to plant something good for the future. When Caleb finished his speech, the entire audience stood up in applause. Sarah cried with pride. Grandma Rose smiled with eyes full of tears, and Toby whistled loudly, making Caleb laugh in the midst of the emotion. After the ceremony, as they were returning to the hotel, Leo asked a question that surprised everyone. "Caleb, do you still remember what it was like to be in the orphanage?" Caleb thought for a moment. "Yes, I do. Why?" "Because sometimes I'm afraid of forgetting. I'm afraid of forgetting where we came from, and of becoming too proud to help other kids like we were." "Leo," said Sarah gently, "you will never forget where you came from. And do you know why? Because you chose to turn your pain into something that helps others. That's what special people do. And besides, added Toby, you taught me that it doesn't matter where we started. What matters is what we do with the opportunities that come our way. That night at the hotel in Washington, D.C., the family gathered in the largest room to talk about plans for the future. With the prize and the funding, they could expand the project to at least 10 states. "Where do you think we should start?" asked Sarah. "In the Amazon," said Caleb immediately. "There must be medicinal plants there we can't even imagine exist. And in the Northeast," suggested Leo, "to help the families suffering from the drought." "And in the South," said Toby. "There are many miners working in poor conditions on the plantations there." Grandma Rose looked at her grandchildren with pride. "You've grown so much, not just in size but in heart too." "We learned from you, Grandma," said Leo. "And from Mrs. Weaver," added Caleb. "And from all of you," said Toby. "I learned that family is this. Each one teaches the other to be better." Mrs. Weaver, who had been quietly listening to everything, finally spoke. "Boys, can I say something?" "Of course, Mrs. Weaver. Your great-great-uncle Silas is very proud of you. I'm sure of it. He spent his whole life preserving those seeds, dreaming of a day when they could help many people. You've made his dream come true. But it's not over yet," said Caleb. "We're going to keep planting. Forever." And so they did. In the years that followed, the Silas Foundation, as the project came to be called, expanded across the country. Medicinal plant preservation centers were established in 12 states, each also functioning as a temporary home for at-risk miners. Caleb became the country's youngest senior researcher in the field of medicinal plants. Leo developed a native animal preservation project that became an international model. Toby graduated in agronomy and psychology, becoming a specialist in the rehabilitation of exploited youth. Sarah became the regional secretary of education, implementing environmental education programs in all schools. Grandma Rose coordinated the administrative side of all the foundation's projects. Mrs. Weaver, at 88 years old, continued traveling the country, teaching the secrets of medicinal plants to new generations. But the most beautiful story was yet to happen. 5 years after the ceremony in Washington, D.C., on a Sunday afternoon, Caleb was in the lab analyzing some newly discovered seeds from the Blue Ridge Mountains when Leo came running in. "Caleb, come quick! There's a woman here looking for Mom." "What woman?" "A lady about 60 years old. She said she's an old friend of Mom's from a long time ago." Caleb left the lab, curious. On the house porch, he found an elegant woman talking with Sarah. The two were crying and laughing at the same time. "Caleb," said Sarah when she saw him arrive, "this is Bennett, my best friend from when we were children." "Pleasure, Caleb. Your mother has talked so much about you and Leo over the years." "What do you mean?" Caleb was confused. "You ladies met over the years?" Sarah and Bennett exchanged a look. "Caleb, there's something I never told you," said Sarah. "Bennett and I never completely lost contact." "What do you mean?" "When I left the region, Bennett was the only person who supported me. She helped me find work in other cities, and we sometimes corresponded by letter." "And you knew where we were?" asked Caleb, feeling a pang of anger. "No, my dear," Bennett replied gently. "Your mother never knew where you were. The letters we exchanged were always about the hope of finding you one day." "Then why didn't you come before?" "Because I didn't know you had returned to the region. I only found out when I saw the news report on television about the award you received in Washington, D.C. Leo, who had approached during the conversation, asked, "And were you also looking for us?" "Yes, I was, dear. All these years, your mother and I exchanged information about any clue that appeared about you." Sarah took Bennett's hand. "Bennett gave me the strength to never give up. When I was most discouraged, she always said that one day we would meet again." "And now?" asked Caleb. "Now I've come to invite you," said Bennett, smiling. "What kind of invitation?" "I'm the director of an NGO that works with family reunification. We help separated families find each other again. I wanted to invite you to be ambassadors for the project." Caleb looked at Leo, then at his mother. "Does that mean we could help other families reunite like ours did?" "Exactly. You have a very powerful story to tell." And the credibility you've gained with your environmental preservation work can help raise awareness about the importance of keeping families together. We accept, said Leo immediately. Leo is right, agreed Caleb. Our family was separated by lies and cruelty. If we can help other families not go through that, we will help. And so began another chapter in the family's story. Alongside their environmental preservation work, they also began working with family reunification. Caleb and Leo traveled across the country, telling their story in schools, orphanages, and social welfare centers. The message was always the same. Family can be those you are born with, but it can also be those you choose to stay with. The project was so successful that in 3 years they managed to reunite over 1,000 separated families. And each reunion was a party, a celebration, a proof that love can overcome any obstacle. But the biggest surprise was still saved for the end of this story. 10 years after they inherited the barn, on a December morning, exactly on the anniversary of the inheritance, Caleb was watering the flower beds when he saw an unfamiliar car approaching. It was an official car with Washington, D.C. license plates. 3 people got out, a man in a suit, an elegant woman, and a girl of about 12. "Good morning," said the man. "We're looking for Caleb and Leo, the founders of the Silas Foundation." "That's me, Caleb. Leo is in the back taking care of the animals. Can I help you with something?" "Yes, you can. I'm Dr. Sterling from the Department of Environmental Protection. This is Dr. Rhodes from the Department of Social Welfare. And this is Maya." Caleb looked at the girl. She seemed shy, but her eyes shone with intelligence. "How can I help you?" "Maya is a very special girl," said Dr. Rhodes. "She is 12, recently lost her parents, and has an extraordinary talent for botany." "She studied everything about your work," continued Dr. Sterling, "and she came to us with a very interesting proposal." "What proposal?" asked Caleb, curious. Maya discovered in the studies she did with her father that there are seeds of medicinal plants preserved in other countries that could be brought back to the U.S. The girl finally spoke. "Caleb, can I call you Caleb?" she asked timidly. "Of course, Maya. I studied your story, how you and your brother were orphans and managed to build all this. I wanted to know if you would have room for one more person in your family." Caleb felt his heart tighten. The girl in front of him reminded him so much of himself and Leo 10 years ago, orphaned, talented, but with no one to believe in her. "Maya, before anything, I need to call my family to meet you. Is that okay?" "Yes, it is." Caleb called everyone. Leo, Toby, Sarah, Grandma Rose, Mrs. Weaver. When they gathered on the porch, he explained the situation. "And you, Maya," Sarah asked delicately, "are you sure you want to be part of a family as large and complicated as ours?" "Yes, I am, Mrs. Sarah. I studied a lot about you all. I know you started small, like me, and built something incredible. I want to learn from you." Leo approached the girl. "Maya, our family is a little crazy. We work a lot, study a lot, and sometimes things get really complicated. Are you sure?" "I am. My father always said the best families are the ones who work together for a bigger goal." Toby smiled. "She's right. And besides, we always have room for one more person who wants to help save the planet." "So, is it decided?" asked Dr. Sterling. "It's decided," said Sarah. "Maya, welcome to the family." And so, 10 years after it all began, the family grew once more. Maya brought with her not only knowledge of botany, but also the energy and curiosity that only a child can have. In the months that followed, she adapted perfectly to the routine of the property. She worked with Caleb in the lab, helped Leo with the animals, learned carpentry from Toby, and became Mrs. Weaver's special assistant in cataloguing all the secrets of medicinal plants. "Maya," Caleb said one day, as they analyzed rare seeds that had arrived from Colombia, "do you have any idea how your arrival changed our family?" "How so?" "We were so used to giving affection that we almost forgot how good it is to receive affection too. You reminded us of that." The girl smiled. "You saved me, Caleb. I was lost, not knowing what to do with my life. Now I know I want to follow the path you all opened." "And what is that path?" "Using science to help people, preserving what's important, and most of all, never letting anyone feel alone in the world. That night at dinner, the whole family was gathered around the table. Sarah, Grandma Rose, Mrs. Weaver, Caleb, Leo, Toby, and Maya. 7 people whom fate had brought together in different ways, but who were now a family in the truest sense of the word. "You know," Caleb said suddenly, "I've been thinking about something." "About what?" asked Leo. "We started with a barn and some old seeds. Now we have projects spread all over Brazil, hundreds of families reunited, plants saved from extinction. And so, maybe it's time we started thinking about what comes next." "How so?" asked Maya. "I mean, our work here in Brazil is well structured. There are good people taking care of everything. Maybe it's time we expanded to other countries." Sarah looked at her son with pride. "Caleb, what exactly are you thinking?" "I'm thinking there are medicinal plants at risk of extinction all over the world, and there are orphan children all over the world too. Maybe we can take our model to other places." Toby got excited about the idea. "That would be incredible. Imagine how many plants we could save, how many children we could help, and how many families we could reunite," added Leo. Mrs. Weaver, who had been quiet, listening to everything, finally spoke. "Boys, do you know what you're proposing?" "We do," said Caleb. "We're proposing to keep doing what we've always done. Plant good things and take care of those in need." "Only now on a much bigger scale," said Maya excitedly. "And are you prepared for that?" asked Grandma Rose. Caleb looked around the table, at each member of the family he had chosen and who had chosen him too. "Grandma, we started knowing nothing, having nothing, knowing no one. Now we have knowledge, we have resources, we have a network of contacts all over the world. If we're not prepared now, we never will be. Besides," said Leo, "we won't be alone. We'll be together, and together we can do anything." And so, the next chapter of the story was decided. In the months that followed, they began to research endangered medicinal plants in other countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. The first international project would be in Peru, where there were Andean medicinal plants that were disappearing due to deforestation. The second would be in Mozambique, where they could work on both preservation and reuniting families separated by war. But regardless of where they went, one thing was clear. They would all go together, as a family. "You know," said Caleb on the eve of the first trip to Peru, "sometimes I think about what would have happened if we hadn't inherited that barn." "Why do you think about that?" asked Maya. "Because it helps me remember where we came from, and it makes me sure we're on the right path." "How so?" "If we hadn't inherited the barn, Leo and I would probably still be in the children's home, or in some random foster family. Sarah would still be teaching at a remote school, feeling guilty for having abandoned us. Grandma Rose would still be in Washington, D.C. looking for us. Toby would still be being exploited on some farm. Mrs. Weaver would have taken all the secrets of the medicinal plants to the grave. And Maya? Well, Maya would be in a situation similar to ours 10 years ago. And so? And so none of that happened, because Uncle Silas planted a seed of hope when he left that inheritance. Now our duty is to keep planting seeds of hope for other people." Leo smiled. "You know what's the most amazing thing about all this?" "What?" "We discovered that the real treasure hidden in the barn wasn't the seeds. It was the possibility of building a real family." Toby agreed. "The seeds were just the means. The real treasure was the chance to show that love and care can transform any situation. And that it doesn't matter how the story begins," said Maya. "What matters is how we choose to continue it." That night, the last one before the trip to Peru, the whole family gathered once more in the barn where it all began. The place was now a modern laboratory, but it still kept the original wooden structure. Caleb went up to the loft where they had found the first jar of seeds. He looked at the hole in the floor, now empty, and smiled. "Thank you, Uncle Silas," he whispered. "Thank you for believing we would know what to do with your gift." "Caleb!" shouted Leo from below. "Come here. We're going to take a family photo." Caleb came down and joined the others. Mr. Harrison, who had come to say goodbye, offered to take the photo. "Everyone together now," he said. "This photo is going down in history. When the flash went off, it captured more than an image. It captured the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. It captured a family that had been formed not by blood, but by choice. It captured proof that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places. And it captured the certainty that, no matter where the future took them, they would go together, continuing to plant seeds of hope around the world. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story of overcoming and family? Do you believe Caleb made the right decisions throughout the journey? Were you moved by the character's transformation? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. I love reading what you think. And if this story touched your heart in any way, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one. Thank you so much for your company on this emotional journey.